Zambia is among over 200 countries worldwide with positive cases of COVID-19. The road transport sector has been identified as one of the conduits through which the virus is spread because of the everyday mass traveling of people. On News In Depth this week, we look at the transport sector's response to the prevention of COVID-19. I'm your host, Macpherson Mukuka. Stay tuned. The COVID-19 pandemic is having a devastating effect on the short-term outlook of the Zambian economy. The disease-induced emergency is paralyzing all sectors and opening the door to unprecedented losses. According to economist commentaries, the long-term economic impact of COVID-19 largely depends on how long the pandemic will last. The Zambian government has taken a steady approach in responding to the COVID-19 crisis. This is in an attempt to try to limit the scope of the outbreak and to flatten the curve. Schools, universities, and other educational centers were closed on the 20th of March 2020 until further notice. The country has kept its airspace open to allow tourist and expatriate workers to return home, but only through Kenneth Kaunda International Airport. All mass public gatherings of more than 50 people have been suspended, church activities included.
All international flights to and from Harry Mwanga Nkumbula, Simon Mwansaka Pwepwe, and Mfue international airports are suspended. Instead, all international flights should land and depart from Kenneth Kaunda International Airport only. Public gatherings such as conferences, weddings, funerals, festivals are to be restricted to at least not more than 50 people, subject to them complying with Public Health Authority guidelines.
Zambia's initial 2-week suspension of international flights that started Wednesday, March 25, 2020, has further been extended for another 2 weeks. Non-essential government and private employees were granted paid leave, and most organizations have set forth altered working procedures. This is in order to avoid crowding, as non-essential workers are encouraged to work from home.
Arising from the successes recorded in the last 2 weeks, I now extend the period of the current measures to another 2 weeks, depending on how the pandemic evolves. All citizens are reminded to practice high levels of personal hygiene, like washing or sanitizing hands. All citizens are reminded to observe social distancing every time and everywhere, while limiting movements. Please stay home in order to stay safe.
The public service transport sector is one of the primary victims of COVID-19. From short to long distance, all have been affected economically by the pandemic. The demand for passenger transport has been adversely hit. The long-distance transport subsector has had a mixed short-term effect in terms of transportation demand from the public. The Ministry of Health has also heightened surveillance on all passengers moving from one district to the other. And to keep the nation abreast with the happenings on COVID-19, the Ministry of Health has been holding routine updates. The Minister of Health, flanked by his counterpart in the Ministry of Information, have been up to task to give the Zambian people first-hand information regarding COVID cases in Zambia.
We recorded the first 2 cases of COVID-19 in Zambia on the 18th of March 2020, and we've been updating the nation as the pandemic evolved. Today, we report 2 new cases of COVID-19. In the last 24 hours, we conducted 123 tests, and out of these 123 tests of contacts, of alerts, we recorded 2 new cases.
The pressure on transport owners has shifted from moving citizens to keeping a core system operational for workers essential to the COVID-19 response. A secondary effect is the sudden change in sources of revenue for transport operators, with many experiencing unprecedented shortfall in their finances. With increasing non-essential traveling restrictions imposed by government, both public transport and their demand have been badly hit.
It has affected us tremendously. It's a heavy cost burden, and hopefully we shall engage the government in trying to see how best we can mitigate these circumstances later on. At the moment, my concentration is not to engage the government with the problems we are facing, but I would rather work with the government to try and face the challenges of the COVID. That's why you have noticed that we've just carried on to fight the COVID instead of engaging the government in issues we are facing as a company. Hopefully, not only as a company, but as transporters, the whole transport sector, we want to give some suggestions to the government to come and help us once we are slowing down on the COVID saga. I know the government is in a tight position. I don't think we can reduce, like the calls are, of the fuel prices and all that, because they need every penny they can have to fight this disease.
Avoiding non-essential traveling is constantly part of the daily call by government ministers, especially during the COVID-19 updates. The Road Transport and Safety Agency Head of Public Relations Frederick Mwanga is calling on all commuters to forgo trips that are not necessary. He says this will help reduce the number of people getting into the central business district, thereby reducing the number of passengers on buses.
Our call is that avoid non-essential travel and if possible, stay at home. But if your travel is very essential, please adhere to the preventive health measures that the Ministry of Health has put in place.
Daily public service users, the commuters, have welcomed the guidelines. Speaking through their leader, Aaron Kamuti, under the auspices of the Commuters' Rights Association, the commuters are cognizant of the dangers of the virus. The commuters have also pledged to work with government in the fight against COVID-19, which they plan to do through extensive sensitization.
So we want to see a situation where we help reduce this spreading of this disease by making sure that we even reduce the number of passengers on each bus. And also we've taken it upon ourselves to make sure that we have few people roaming around the bus stations. We don't need people to be moving aimless. They have to know why they are supposed to be traveling. So this is our appeal to the commuters, that they should stop moving aimless. What they are supposed to do is to make sure that whatever they want to do, they do it once and for all. You don't go back to town every day.
Even though the fall in passenger transport demand is pushed by social distancing restrictions, COVID-19 may have a long-term effect on people's travel behavior. Citing higher risk of community spread of the virus in buses, government through the Ministry of Transport issued guidelines for public transport operators. These include various instructions from reducing the number of passengers per trip to disinfecting seats.
When it comes to the issue of transport, I think information is what must be promoted. The information of what COVID-19 has capabilities to do to us as human beings should cause us to act in a manner that shows that we are responding to the messages that are coming from, from the authorities. I am thinking that we have been taught we need to, promote social distancing. It's everywhere. On the bus, social distancing. In the church, social distancing. Even in our homes, social distancing, because this is a very important issue. And we can't separate, certain areas and say for these areas it's okay to crowd. I think it is inappropriate, and we must make sure we heed the cause.
However, as the transportation sector employs millions of people, in the long run, it is necessary to understand the pandemic's impact on consumer preference and the subsequent transportation demand for passengers. Capital Buses proprietor Ishmael Kankara has explained that he and his men have decided to do a routine spraying on the buses in a bid to keep them free from the virus and also protect the passengers.
Disinfecting the area alone cannot just help. I'll be very honest with you. Disinfectant, how long will it last? 5, 6, 7 hours? And then after that, and we don't disinfect every 5, 6 hours, and we can't. And not only we can't, it's not practical. So it's upon us to be extra careful. Like for example, you disinfect the whole bus. I'm infected. I go into the bus, this disinfectant has worn out. I go in the bus and I touch something. And then later on you come in and you jump in the bus and you touch the same surface, and then afterwards you just put your mouth. It's natural for us to touch our faces and nose and eyes and all that. You want to rub your eyes or something. And if that infection was there and you put it on your fingers and then on your body, it means you're infected. So look, it's a funny disease. It's deadly. It's extremely lethal. So basically what we need to do is we must try and prevent that disease to come into us.
Other than disinfecting the buses and practicing social distancing, another important preventive measure the Minister of Health has emphasized on is that of wearing face masks. However, the Road Transport and Safety Agency notes that very few commuters are following this guideline, and it is urging them to start wearing face masks.
Let's ensure that at every time that you use a public service vehicle, you should wear a face mask. That is point number one to be observed. And when we are also employing public service vehicle operators to provide facilities such as sanitizers, so that people should regularly wash their face, their hands, and of course to mitigate the spread of the virus.
The Commuters' Rights Association nods to the call by RTSA.
I think also we want that through the Ministry of Commerce to engage CCPC. Why people are failing to have masks on their faces, they are too expensive. People are failing to buy this mask. Maybe if we have a source where we would have a cheaper a type of masks which can be supplied to people, I think that will help the situation. And also the Ministry of Health, they need to come in. Since we are working with them, we've been appealing to them that they give us this mask so that we supply to the commuters.
Practicing social distancing is not only advised during public gathering, but also on buses. The Road Transport and Safety Agency has urged the transport operators to adhere to the set guidelines.
For public transport, as RTSA, we know people have to move from point A to point B. For public transport, we encourage that if it's not necessary, please stay at home. The 1 meter social distance in a 14-seater high minibus may reduce to 6 people if we have to follow that social distance. So as schools were closed by government, as colleges were closed, universities were closed. So for people also, those ones that are, it's been directed that if you're not essential worker, stay at home. So we encourage the public that as much as possible, if you can avoid using public transport, stay at home.
Many players in the transport sector are adapting to the changing demands. For instance, most bus drivers are taking into consideration the social distancing on their buses. However, on the issue of carrying less passengers than normal on public buses, Mr. Kankara feels this is a matter that requires consensus from all players in the transport sector.
It's not working at all. This is why we followed the minister's thoughts. I would not say it's a directive, I would say it's a thought. He had a good, wonderful idea of 60%. But even 60% is very, very difficult. And we did it. I'm sure you're aware that 2.5 weeks we were only loading 60% and we dropped our cash in by nearly half. It was not working because I could see my drivers were loading full. And it was not working, so we had to revert back to the old system. But on top of that, what we have done is we are hopefully trying to tell the drivers that get masks, conductor must have a mask, you must have a mask, and insist on your passengers to have a mask. If they don't have a mask, we've got a lot of chiteja materials lying around at home and all that. Just wear it on top, a little piece, or get a mask and make sure that you keep washing it in Dettol or some disinfectant.
Due to the screening process of people coming into the country, there has been a delay for truck drivers transporting essential goods. For instance, there is over 500 trucks waiting to be cleared from various border posts in Zambia. This is because the drivers have to go into a 14-day quarantine period upon entry into Zambia through Kazungula border and other border posts. Kazungula District Commissioner Pascalina Msokotwane has described the situation as stable and that drivers are now complying.
The time we started, the quarantine process and evacuating them from Kazungula into Livingstone, the process has been smooth and so far so good. I mean, like we've managed at least to push most of them into Livingstone. And even as we speak, most of them actually have started graduating in terms of, completing their quarantine period, which was the 14 days.
Lazarus Sapalo and his friends are among the drivers that have managed to complete 14 days period in isolation and is homebound. He shares his experience in isolation while pointing out to some challenges he and his friends face.
We're using water which doesn't look well treated, and then it was not well coordinated. The whole program wasn't well coordinated in the start. Like, we were bundled in one small space, a lot of drivers from different areas and different lives. So that gave us a lot of challenges, but otherwise we had to sacrifice a few things. We had to try and make things what we could assist. What we couldn't, we could just try and keep ourselves, like to do self-quarantine, stay mostly in your trucks so that you just pull through with the 14 days until the last day. Like now, we are very happy we're going to see our families.
The supply chain disruption and slowdown caused by COVID-19 is expected to pull down in the coming days. According to Ms. Msokotwane, all drivers carrying essential goods are now leaving the border heading to Lusaka through Livingstone. This follows the decision by the SADC member states to allow the vehicles carrying essential commodities such as oil, perishable goods and drugs to continue moving.
The drivers, those which were carrying perishable goods, including drugs, anything which is essential, they were all being escorted into Lusaka. But for those non-essential, they were the ones, completing their quarantine period in Livingstone. So even as we speak, I don't think we even have maybe more than 10 or 20 trucks that are carrying essentials. And as you may be aware, it's not those trucks which came in earlier on, because trucks keep on flocking in. Of course, not a big number of them within a day, but they are still coming in slowly.
Allowing the continuous movement of trucks amid COVID-19 has called for an additional task from government and the Road Transport and Safety Agency. Since the decision was made in early April, the Road Transport and Safety Agency has devised a movement plan to escort the trucks to their destinations. The escort is aimed at ensuring that drivers move in a single journey without branching out to meet other people, lest they fall prey to COVID-19.
RTSA, of course, working with other government stakeholders, came in to ensure that we are available, to ensure that we provide the necessary escort to vehicles with the essential commodities as directed by government. And as RTSA will continue to engage other sectors of government, work with government departments in ensuring that the movement of services and goods is not interrupted, and ensure that the safety of our workers is enhanced, to ensure that as we are doing this escort, our officers are safe and the movement of services and goods are not interrupted, to ensure that the economy continues to move in the positive direction.
The list of essential people and commodities must be continuously revised to minimize the adverse impact on people's lives and the spread of the pandemic. Considering this simple lockdown as a large travel demand experiment, organizations have much to gain from optimizing transportation of employees in the future in terms of productivity and costs. But Lazarus Sapalo has an appeal to government to look into the plight of quarantine truck drivers in isolation centers. He says the truck drivers, if not taken care of whilst in isolation centers, they are likely to overlook the guidelines in an attempt to look for food.
It's really very bad to do that, but I can't blame them, because we all know that by the end of the day, everyone needs to survive. He has to eat. So if government can do it beyond what they've done, like put in more money, like if they can provide meals for people that are being quarantined, because for sure we wouldn't want to risk other people's lives, but if we have to eat, what do? We have to go and look for the food. So it's up to the government to take it upon themselves that they have to provide something for the people to eat, make sure that the whole conditions and the environment is conducive for everyone. Like it should provide good food, clean sanitation, good water. I mean, you won't see somebody trying to abrogate such conditions, because they are all family people. We are not doing it for ourselves. We are doing it for our families that are out there. We are coming from countries that we are very sure that the risk of COVID is very high.
The liberty that truck drivers enjoy during their long journeys crossing borders may seem to be infringed upon with such an escort. It is therefore yet to be seen whether these measures will yield anticipated results in the prevention of COVID-19. But RTSA says the drivers should not at any point feel intimidated, as the escorts are strictly a life-saving measure.
Of course, it may feel as if it's intimidation and for them to feel lack of freedom. I think it's a time for reflection. It's not something to play about with. We have seen the numbers of deaths that we have lost from other countries. And I think that I want to commend government for what they've provided and the guidance that they're providing the movement of people and goods. And the escorts that are being provided by the agency and the Zambia Police are meant through Ministry of Health to ensure that we save lives of our drivers. We still need them to continue distribution of goods. And I think that there shouldn't be that feeling. And from the few drivers that we've spoken to, there's a feeling from themselves as well that it is for their own good to ensure that they quarantine, they are tested, that they are okay before they join their families. Because if they just proceed without being certified to be okay, I think there's a huge risk that we risk our families in our homes. And one thing, if we do that and it can spread, and we risk our own children and other family members at our houses.
Even after the situation normalizes, the perception of risk associated with crowded areas could lead to a shift in preferences towards personal travel modes. That is, people may avoid using public transport modes to avoid crowds. But in an event that a similar pandemic occurs, which will require the services of RTSA, the agency CEO declares the organization ready.
Mass movement of people and goods runs the economy. So as RTSA want to remain steadfast, ready, but working with other stakeholders to ensure that such a pandemic going forward and in the future, we need to ensure that there is, of course, sustainable funding to such kind of operations, but the support from government has really been overwhelming, and we stand ready as RTSA to ensure that we will be available to ensure that we support all the activity that government desires to undertake to support the movement of goods. We know that transportation is key to economic development.
The partial lockdown means that only essential people and commodities are permitted by the authorities to move. Also during this period, and due to the restricted transport modes, people have been exposed to walking on roads with neither pollution nor congestion. Hence, authorities may expect better results in future policies aimed at pushing short trips into non-vehicle modes. In the medium to long run, the transport sector can play an important role in overcoming the COVID-19 challenges facing Zambia by showcasing to government and businesses international practices in dealing with restricted movements. In particular, the Road Transport and Safety Agency, working with the Zambia Chartered Institute of Transport and Logistics, can provide recommendations in areas related to transport and logistics, automation and management. This includes providing industry leaders with information and advice about state-of-the-art solutions and business continuity planning methodologies. This is where we come to the end of this week's edition of News in Depth, where we'll be looking at the transport sector's response to the prevention of COVID-19. I have been your host, Macpherson Mkuka. Join us next week for yet another exciting News in Depth program. For now, it's goodbye and God bless you.